Hey everyone, welcome to an Audible stream because I was going to be talking about kind of crowdfunding and how I do crowdfunding and maybe what some interesting ways to, or maybe some things people don't consider when they look at crowdfunding, or how they kind of think about the value of the games that they're backing, or what's a good bang for your buck in terms of a game. But instead, I have this guy here who is a giant box of Descent Journeys in the Dark, I believe it is, and just showed up today, so I thought I should do an unboxing of this. I don't have the overhead cam set up today, so I'm going to try and hold stuff like that. In all fairness, I think this is a better camera than the video camera that I'm using, so who knows, I might slowly swap out some of the cameras as I go. But yeah, we have this big box to look at, plus we can talk about maybe some other things that I've picked up recently, and or just talk about value in gaming, because I do question what sort of value this game is going to have in the long run. And I'll talk some about that as I get ready here to unbox it. So, before we do that, we have a nice little old-fashioned in a moose cup. This is my favorite old-fashioned glass that I have. Really nice tumbler. And this is a whiskey, Japanese whiskey, that I'm using, along with rhubarb bitters and simple syrup. And I'm generally a fairly big fan of whatever sort of bitters I can put in stuff, but also Japanese whiskey as a whole. Now, this one that I have, Suntory Whiskey Toki, this one is, according to some friends who have been to Japan, generally the one that you would get mixed into mixed drinks over there. So kind of like how you go into an Irish bar, they're going to have Jameson, or you go to something like Applebee's, you're probably doing something like Johnny Walker or Jack Daniels. This is going to be the one that in Japan they use to mix. Or at least in parts of Japan. I don't want to assume that it's all of Japan, having not been there myself or really traveled around. There might be some different regional whiskeys that are more common in in certain areas. But if you haven't tried out Japanese whiskey and you do like whiskey, there's some really good stuff out there. It's not necessarily the cheapest, because for a while it just wasn't that available in the US. And now it is a bit more so, so you can find some of them at a pretty normal, reasonable price. Oh, then it's just smooth. So, shift this into view a little bit more here. And I'll take this off to the side and pull stuff out and show stuff off to the camera as I go. Why do I say this is not a great deal? And actually, the reason doesn't have anything to do with the game in this box. The reason has to do with the reaction of people online when this game was announced. This game, which is app heavy, was announced with, I'm going to set this out to the side so I can get this whole box out, a $175 price tag. Now, you saw how big that whole box was. This is how big the box that comes in it is. So this is definitely a big box. And there's a fair amount in here, but compared to, say, some of the Kickstarter games, stuff like that out there, this doesn't come with the plethora of minis. This doesn't come with the 600 page campaign adventure guide. This is still a Fantasy Flight game, so it's not going to be as big, though. I mean, this is just physically really big. I like the spot gloss on top. Pull off the cover here. Show that off. That's just a cool looking cover. But people thought the price tag was too high. You add in the fact that this is a game that uses an app. Now, if there's a Kickstarter game where there's an app and there's a book, most people are still going to use that app. But because there's a book, there are those few very loud purists that say board games can't have anything digital in it. If it has something digital, what's the difference between that and just playing a video game? And I'm only so on the packaging that was done from Cool Stuff. I think it's more their side of things that bunk that up. It also doesn't really matter to me that much because I don't care if it's going to be in perfect condition. I'm going to play this. I think another thing that got people too was the fact in this corner it says Act 1. So I have Madara, Unintentional Malum, Act 1 up above me over here. And that was a game that actually had a fairly similar price tag. It just felt like it had more stuff. This doesn't feel like there's as much stuff to it because we have a rulebook. We have a very thin book here that has kind of a guide, an understanding of the world of Tiernoth in there. So, well, this has some cool things, like stuff you actually have to put together for 3D Terrain. And an advertisement for their Genesis RPG system here. It doesn't feel like there's as much to this box as there should be. And some of the reason is this. So, with how this box works, we have this box that sits on top of that one, and there's a huge empty space below. That doesn't seem like that great a deal. You can pull out this Not a Valley of the Shadow of Death insert, because this actually is something you can use as part of your 3D terrain. So that piece is cool. But why am I still then excited for this game? And why do I think that, one, people were a little bit off in the reaction for this game? I think it was mainly because of the price tag that it caused people to jump and get really freaked out with this game. That is a steep price tag, and they thought, oh, there's no way this is going to be as good as they're saying. But pull this guy out. This game does some stuff that I really find interesting. Like, I like games that use apps. I do not need every game, nor do I want every game that I have to have an app. But a big story adventure type game, give me an app every day. Give me something to handle that story. And I already know from stuff like the Imperial Assault app, Dimensions Madness app, the Journeys to Middle Earth app. Actually, I can't point to it anymore. I sold that one. they make a good app that helps facilitate the story. Man, this feels so light. Remember, somebody talked about it when I saw an unboxing or something of it. This is a really light mini. Now this, let me be very clear. This doesn't feel chintzy or cheap or anything like that. This is a really nice mini. Great detail on it. Yeah, that just looks real cool, but it is super light, and it's very much a hard plastic. And I'm very much not going to be using this case again. So that's a little bit of a waste, but I understand why they put it in there, because they didn't want anything to break. Let me pull out, well, a bunch more minis here. 2 layers. Ooh, did I miss a layer in that one? Gotta check. Looks like single layer. Yep, single layer. So like I said, the app piece interests me as well in something that is so story driven. Ooh, and we have the characters down here, so thus far I've just pulled out monsters, being the brownish bases. Let's look at these characters. And that is a cool looking character, and I will say with this plastic, since it is a harder plastic, it does flex a little bit, thankfully, so it won't just shatter. But with the harder plastic, for a lot of minis with this sphere here, there would be sag on both sides of where this is held because it's a softer plastic. With this plastic, it holds up super well. Let's look at some more characters. Oh, she looks cool. Do a couple more here. I really like the artwork in this game. I know some people don't. Okay, that's real cool. But I like the style for this game. Trying to get it in front of my face. Kind of helps with the focus, maybe. But this bird, with their fire, is not actually connected to anything. That's just floating there. And that's, again, that's something that would normally sag, but it doesn't here. Let's do one more. Because this is the guy who has been part of the artwork since the beginning that people haven't necessarily liked that much. This archer. But I like the detailing on him. I like the look of him. We have more monsters as well. But generally really nice components. I like these guys a lot. So what drew me to this game, even with the price tag? And so this isn't related to why I was drawn towards this game. Try to put that on backwards. But I'm a software developer, so this price tag really didn't make me flinch that much. Oh my goodness. That's all cardboard. And you can see on the back here, you can see all those little slits and stuff like that that are one pre-punched, which is awesome. Like, as much as I will harp on Fantasy Flight about like poor storage and stuff like that, because this isn't great. The fact that they pre-punch those, like, I haven't seen another company do that. And so this is 3D terrain, map tiles, stuff like that in here. And that's going to be the stuff that goes in this box. The 3D terrain, once it's all put together, it can all fit in there. So you don't have to worry about taking stuff apart or anything like that. We have some little plastic bases here. Look nice. Dice, we have D6, not with 6 dot levels, D8s and D12s. So that's cool. I like those. Anywhere I can get orange dice is great. 8 sleeves. I'm not sure what for. Now we're getting down here to the cards. And down at the bottom here, we do have that guy in the standard Fantasy Flight Valley of the Shadow of Death, as I like to call it, the bad storage solution. And on the back, more spot gloss on the back side of the box that goes inside the box. They spent a bunch of time on this. Oh, yeah, there's even spot gloss back here. You can see how that 3D terrain kind of works there. And that's just cool. I don't care who you are. So, let's meet our heroes. We also have these boards, which... Oh, I was like, I'm not sure what these are for. Because this looks like a pit of acid, maybe, or maybe falling down, who knows into what. Water, spikes, and lava. So these aren't really the pieces of terrain you're necessarily going to be playing on as much. This is when you get that 3D terrain and it goes over with a bridge. There's the water for the moat, or the river beneath that. Let's look at our different characters. We have Bryn. Same artwork on both sides when you flip for her ability here. Not much changes except for her abilities. So the ability here and there. Those change when you flip sides. I know people don't love this artwork, but I kind of dig it for Galadin. And I mean, he's the type of character I like to play in a game like this, where I like to be able to do some damage, but at a range. Kelly, the Dwarf Artificer. Clever trap and adaptable. Valtrix. Or, no, not Valtrix. Wow, Varix. The Dragon Hybrid Outcast. That's another cool looking character. That's the one I was commenting on with the staff. Chance. The Herinx Rogue. So it looks like a rogue jackal kitty cat type thing. And I'm always for rogues that have giant paws with claws over their paws with claws. That's fun. Not normal might. Agility is good. Insight, not so great on the will. Oh, that's interesting. So, I always like to look at the combos of like the numbers here to see how it matches up. And we do have one last, Cyrus, who has his Phoenix, which is just cool. Because like Cyrus has +2 on insight, +1 on will, and -1 on agility and might. Whereas Chance has 0 might, +2 agility, 0 insight, and -1 will. So you'd think, looking at that, it's like, okay, you have a +2 in something, and then if you have a +1, you have the -2 in the other two things, or if you don't have a +1, you have 0 in two of the things and -1 in the others. But here we have Varix, who's -1 might, 0 agility, +2 insight and +2 will, or +1 insight and +2 will. So the same setup as Cyrus, but with 1 less negative. And then Kaylee is +1 might, -1 agility, +1 insight, +1 will. But Galadin then is +1 might, +1 agility, -1 insight, and 0 for that. And Bryn matches up with Cyrus in that she has +2 might, +1 will, and -1 agility and insight. So interesting that they're not all the same in terms of like the range that they go through. And my guess is that has some to do with these abilities, and I think this is fatigue, how much you can take. Just, there are other ways that they're balancing it, or more likely the stats on the characters gave them a way to do a fine balancing of stuff without too much. And then we have 3 bags of cards, and I'm not going to dig through these too much. It's like we have our nice little cheat sheet cards here. Looks like a spell, maybe something like that. Mutation potion, Rune of Blades, Dark Steel Plate Armor, Mud Potion, but I want to get back to value again, because honestly, this game, even though I got to unbox it all with you guys here, or whenever you're watching it, there's still a conversation to be had about value, and a conversation about how you have to consider a lot of things when you consider the value. What is the value of a game? If I like this game and I play through all of it, but I decide I'm not going to play through it again, will I be able to get my $140 back for this game? Will I be able to find somebody who's willing to buy it for $140? No, probably not. Why? Because this is a game that a lot of people, no matter what, are going to have already made up their minds on. One, because of the price point, because it's Fantasy Flight, because there's an app, whatever it might be, they're going to have made up their mind already going into this game. There's a group of people out there who will never buy this game, even if this game moves up to like top 100 of all time on Board Game Geek, because it can't be that good because of how expensive it is, because it uses an app, because they don't like the artwork, whatever that might be. And I mean, when you're buying a game, you do have to consider kind of the value of that game. So let's kind of look at 3 examples here. And one of these examples, or 2 of these examples actually, I've talked about recently, and the third one is also currently on Kickstarter right now. One just wrapped up on GameFound with the Chronicles of Drunagar, and one is still on Kickstarter, Iridia, The Paths We Dare Tread, which is that game name is so good. I love The Paths We Dare Tread as the subtitle for that game. Like, sure, it's generic or unknown fantasy name, but the subtitle tells you so much about the feel of that game. And so all of these games have different price tags to them. So Iridia, if I remember correctly, is about $160 plus $20 shipping, so about $180 for the game, or up to $230, or maybe $230 for the extra content for it. And I think that game's actually going to be a good value. Now, the reason why I say that is, while it's a new game, it's from the company and the creators who did Xia Legends of Drift System, a big space exploration game. This one's very different from that, but it's going to do well, and it's going to be a game that has been thought out well. That's one thing you know about these designers, is they don't rush into this game. I think they say that Iridia was something like 7 years in the making, so it is not a rushed into project. And MSRP is going to be 200, I think they said 220, 240 bucks. So getting it for 160 plus 20 bucks shipping is a really good price. I mean, you're under by 40 to 60 bucks off of MSRP, which I think is a little bit misleading, because I don't think there's going to really be an MSRP. There's going to be a few places that will buy up a number of pledges to get them into the store, but this isn't going to be a game that you're going to find in the stores all that often. And for that reason, I think there's a level of really good value with that. Plus, the gameplay itself seems like it has great layers to it. I mean, literally, it does have layers, because you go from this world view to this area view to this dungeon map. So you take it from this almost map type thing, or it is a map of the lands as you travel about, down into this battle that happens. And so I think with the designer pedigree and with everything that you're getting in that game, it's going to be a good value for you. Even if you play through it once, like I was talking about with Descent, you're going to be able to sell Iridia for more than you got it. I would say it's a quite safe bet that game is going to do well. Or if you play it right away when you get it and you don't like it, there's going to be a secondhand market that's very strong for it. Next one is going to be Chronicles of Drungar, which is the one that and Iridia are the two that I compared. And Chronicles of Drungar is the one that I ended up backing for a couple different reasons. One, it's more of a tactical minis game. It's more of a tactical dungeon crawler. And while I love story, and I mean, Tainted Grail is moving up the list for me as this story-driven epic adventure game, and I cannot wait to get ISS Vanguard, another story-driven epic adventure game in from Awakened Realms. But I went with Chronicles of Drungar for a couple different reasons. One, there are reviews on it. There are not just previews on it, and like Iridia has a few previews, not a ton. There's previews and reviews for Chronicles of Drungar because of this being the second Kickstarter for it, or first game found, second crowdfunding for it. And there's also the fact that the secondary market is amazing for this game. A $500 pledge, which I did not go for, you can sell that for $700 plus $100 shipping, or something near that. So you could make money off of that if the game isn't for you. And even with the second crowdfunding going on right now, or just wrapped up, and I'm assuming there'll be light pledges for it, you're still going to be able to make your money back on it. Why? Because it's an expensive game. Like Iridia, this is not Iridia, like Iridia that I talked about previously, that's going to be a game that it's expensive enough it's going to keep a bunch of people from backing it. And that actually might be the saving grace if I find out that Descent Legends of the Dark isn't for me. Because it might mean that there's just not as many copies out there. And sometimes, really, that's all you need is not as many copies to show up. And that will make your game worth something. But Chronicles of Drungar has good value, not just because you can resell it for a lot, not just because there are good reviews on it, but because you're getting a lot of stuff. This is a minis heavy game. This is a game that uses 3D terrain. This is a game that has story elements to it and some cool ideas. There's just a ton that you get in the box or boxes or truckload of boxes that you can get for the game. And so you look at that with the proven track record, with the improvements they're making to the system, this could be a really great game, and I'm really excited to get that one in sometime late 2022. But let's then talk about Earthborn Rangers. So Earthborn Rangers, and I guess I should talk about the pricing for Chronicles of Drungar. For the original game and stretch goal box on the most recent crowdfunding on GameFound, it was $115 plus I believe $45 for shipping. So you're looking at about $160 for that. I went beyond that to pick up some of the expansion stuff. I'll probably be in for about $240. But it's still going to be a good value because that $240, which it has an MSRP for it, so the $115 is about, I think they put the MSRP for that at $200 or just over $200. Now, like Iridia, it's going to be a few places, few game shops that buy copies to sell it. That's what we're going to see the MSRP as, or slightly less, but it's not really going to hit retail. But the last one is Earthborn Rangers. So Earthborn Rangers is a story-driven card playing game where it almost feels a little bit like, I want to say, like the late 90s video games to me, where like it's semi-open world, and I think the game itself is more open world into what you can do, that you then can interact with objects in kind of whatever way you want. There's a dog. You can pet that dog. And so Earthborn Rangers is, like I said, a story-driven game kind of set in a post-apocalyptic world. And by that I mean the Earth is coming back and it's green, but humanity is still kind of scattered and needs to kind of protect the Earth, help bring it back, that sort of thing. So it's a happier, not really post-apocalyptic setting anymore that this adventure, these stories are going to take place in. This is about, if I remember correctly, an $80 or $90 game with $20 or $30 shipping. So the cheapest by far, in between $100 and $120, or a little bit more. And the little bit more is basically you buy some stuff so that if two people want to play a ranger, and I'm just making up the ranger class here for that, they can. Basically, you're just buying extra sets of cards so people can play the same thing if they want to. Yeah, I don't consider that game to be great value. Why? Because the majority of the cost is being driven by the fact that they're trying to be very... Oh, I just realized I am on the wrong audio input. I apologize, this probably sounds like garbage. Let me check. Garbage. Oh, thankfully it doesn't. Phew. But the concern for me is that this game doesn't have that much. It doesn't have minis. Both Iridia and Chronicles of Drunagar have minis. Iridia doesn't have that many minis, but it has some. Earthborn Rangers doesn't really have terrain. Now, Chronicles of Drunagar has terrain. Iridia has their different map levels. Earthborn Rangers is just cards. And it's just not that many cards. I applaud them for being green and sustainable, or more sustainable, and looking potentially to publish and produce stuff not overseas, so they don't have to ship as much, but that's driving up the cost. That's driving up the cost on a game from designers who worked at Fantasy Flight. So designers who I think would be good, but I'm just worried that it's not going to feel like what you paid for. Something like the Seventh Continent, I think with shipping, that cost me about $100, maybe a little bit less. And, well, I haven't played it yet, which I really do need to play it. It's a game where I know that it's going to feel big. Why? Because you have these tiny little square cards. You create this map. Like, I want to set this up on my game table here and just spread it out and build it as big as I can get it. Like, not have to worry about picking up any cards to make it smaller. I think it's just the difference in amount of content. And had I had time, I was going to talk a little bit about another game here. This is not an actual game there. This is a box that I used to store Marvel Champions, just as another game that feels bigger with it only being cards, and with, I mean, not that many cards in the base game, it still feels like there's more going on. Now, I've spent more than 120 bucks on Marvel Champions at this point. It's not even close. But it just feels like it's something that there's more to it. And some of it is I know the game. I didn't buy it until there had been positive reviews out. Since it's a Fantasy Flight game, I knew I was going to be able to get it later. It took me a while to track down some of the characters, but I knew I was going to be able to find stuff eventually. Whereas Earthborn Rangers, that's a tricky sell. Again, that's a tricky one because there's not reviews. There's not a proven track record. I mean, there is, but there's also not. And it just feels like a game that costs too much for what it is. And a game looking at it where I can go, I'm not sure that if I play through this and I feel like I'm done with the story, or I'm done with what's going on in the game, that there's going to be enough of a market for people who are going to want to buy it at the price point that I would need to break even, or to be able to sell it if it is 80 bucks, which I think it is. I'm not even sure I could sell it for 80 bucks. It feels like a $50 game. And yeah, it's great to be sustainable and everything, but we have to find, or they have to find a way to do it at a price point that makes people want to get it. Now, thankfully, it's going to get made. I mean, I could be very wrong on this and could end up tracking it down later for 150 bucks on eBay. Probably won't because there's so many other good games. I'm not going to pay the markup. But for me, it's kept me from being that interested in it just because the value point of the amount of gameplay, the depth of gameplay, even compared to something like $175 worth of Descent that doesn't have that many minis, this feels like there's more to it. And, I mean, the app certainly helps. And developing an app, as I was talking about earlier, is not cheap. I'm a developer. My services do not come cheap, and I'm not even an app developer, which their services come less cheap. So it just feels, it's about finding the value in the games, and sometimes these games, there's more value to you owning the game at whatever price point you feel comfortable with versus thinking about that sale in the future too. I really don't think about potential resale value of any of my games when I purchase them. I mean, I won't be putting stuff into a box like this if I cared about the resale value of Marvel Champions. I'd still have the clamshells for everything. I'd still have the boxes for the expansions. I mean, Marvel United I have down to 3 boxes from 8. So there's definitely this area of considering the value of what you're getting versus what you might get at retail versus will it be at retail later, to consider with your games, or even if they are at retail, is this going to be something that is 140 bucks, 130 bucks, whatever it was, for a year, for 6 months even? Or is the price just going to keep on going down on this on retail? Could have I waited 3 months and gotten this cheaper? And honestly, I don't think so. This is a hog. This is a big game. This is not some stuff that go down in price are either stuff that people overstock on and can't sell all of them, which is generally smaller games. or it's an established big game that there's finally enough of out there. Like Gloomhaven, you can get for under $100 now at the right times. This, I don't think we'll ever get that low. And some of it is Asmodee probably won't let it be sold that low. But how do you define value in your games? Is it the games that you play a lot? Or is it games that you can resell for a lot? Let me know that down in the comments below. Also, check out the links in the description below. There are Facebook, Malts and not Malts and Meeples. This is Malts and Meeples. 10 Minute Marvel, Twitter, Nerdologist.com, Patreon links that you can check out below. If you're enjoying the content, consider subscribing, checking this out. I will try and get better about posting when I'm going live. So nothing live on Wednesday this week. Thursday this week I will be live again with more Aeons and Legacy as I think I'm halfway through that now. But thank you all for watching, and as I hide my face, show off the moose, bottoms up.